You can see it in a child's smile.
We will not be silent witnesses to oppression.
We will not be idle while there is injustice.
We will not rest while children suffer.
We are faith. Our Christian faith teaches us that every newborn child is a precious gift from God, and that their well-being and their future concerns us all. We are hope. We embrace what some believe to be impossible challenges and empower communities to overcome them. We are joy. Our joy is the joy of others who see their hopes and dreams fulfilled.
We are 50,000.
We are 50,000 passionate staff and volunteers who have dedicated their skills and experience to helping others.
We are 10 million.
We are 10 million committed supporters who know that we are making a real and lasting change in children's lives.
We are 100 million.
We are 100 million people in towns, villages and cities throughout the world, working hard every day to build a better life for our children. We are one, a global community of people committed to improving the lives and futures of the world's most vulnerable boys and girls. We are World Vision.
For children.
For change.
For life.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar for Every Girl, held in conjunction with International Day of the Girl, which falls on 11th October every year. My name is Eileen, and I will be your MC for today. On behalf of World Vision Singapore, welcome, and we are very happy to have all of you here with us today. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us. Here are some webinar guidelines before we start the session. For best viewing options, please click on View Options at the top and click Side-by-Side mode. This will help to enhance your webinar experience today. Please also use the Q&A function located at the bottom of your screen if you have any questions for our speakers about our work. We will try to address as many relevant questions as we can during the Q&A segment at the end. This webinar is expected to last for about 1 hour and 30 minutes. A recording will also be made available after. For security purposes, please do not attempt to record the webinar on your own. So now, to begin the program, let us first watch a short clip.
No girl should have to live in fear, but so many of us do. Where I live, every day holds dangers, just because I'm a girl.
We live in fear of violence that takes many forms.
We fear walking home from school,
being forced into labor, into marriage.
We want to know our rights,
to stand up, to have choices.
We want to live free of fear.
Around the world, girls are saying enough is enough.
Like Musomi and the Henna girls, who are standing up against violence and educating their village about girls' rights.
Imagine being part of 1,000 more stories, just like Musumi's.
Right now, thousands of girls urgently need a sponsor.
Join the movement to sponsor 1,000 girls by International Day of the Girl, October 11th.
Together, you and I can create a future without fear. Sponsor a girl today.
The short video that you've watched highlights some of the reasons why girls around the world live in daily fear. As humans, we all have the right to healthcare, education, safety, employment, and economic opportunity. Women, men, boys, and girls alike. Yet around the world, women and girls are denied these basic rights in their lives simply because of their gender. This picture that I found online perfectly illustrates this. Women and girls, unfortunately, are not all given the same tools and opportunities in life as men and boys. Why does gender inequality matter, you might ask? Because it does not affect women and girls alone. It has a compounding effect that hinders the well-being, livelihoods, and potential of children and their families, which in turn affects the sustainable development of communities and countries. For today's webinar, we'll be exploring the difficulties and challenges faced by girls living in different parts of the world, and what World Vision is doing to address gender inequality issues in a diversity of sectors. To do this, we have invited three very special guests today who will be sharing their personal experiences with you. Do allow me to introduce them to you before we move on to the topic on hand. Next slide, please. Yay. Firstly, we have with us today Ms. Narges Ghaffari from Afghanistan. She's a former refugee, relief and development specialist, and communications expert who has spent the last decade working with organizations such as World Vision, UNICEF, as well as UNICEF within rural Afghan communities. Hi Narges, can you turn on your video and say hi to everyone from Singapore? We're very happy to speak with you again. Hi Narges.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Okay. And next, we actually also have a pre-recorded video of one of our beneficiaries from India, Rita. And to protect the identity of Rita, unfortunately, we are unable to show her photo. But here's a photo of her together with her friends from a drop-in center that is run by World Vision in the red light district of Kolkata. Last but not least, we have another special guest, another inspiring lady here with us, Jacqueline, to share with us why she has chosen to advocate for women and girls. Jacqueline is a World Vision Advisory Council member. She is also the Assistant Chief Executive of Sentosa Development Corporation. Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi,
nice to see
everybody.
you. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure on my part to be here and look forward to sharing a little bit more a little later on.
Okay, thank you. Before we start the session with Narges, I would like to remind everyone, if you have any questions during this webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Alternatively, you can also WhatsApp us at 6922-0144. So I know some of you in the audience may not know very much about World Vision, so I would like to share very quickly on what we do. World Vision is a Christian humanitarian organization. We operate in 100 countries and are dedicated to helping the most vulnerable children to overcome poverty and experience fullness of life. We serve all people, regardless of religion, race, ethnicity, or gender. A key part of World Vision's work is really to partner with local stakeholders to improve the well-being of children through multiple sector projects that address the root causes of poverty. The 5 key sectors that we work in include economic livelihoods and microfinance, education, health, water and sanitation, as well as child protection. Child protection lies at the heart of all that we do at World Vision. We believe that when children are protected and thrive, only then can the communities that they live in flourish as well. Let's have a look at some of the statistics, because at this stage, some of you in the audience might be wondering, how bad is it really for women and girls? So gender disparities typically start small in childhood, but they balloon at the onset of adolescence. From the slides, you can see that worldwide, 1 in 4 girls in her teenage years is not employed or studying. This is in comparison with 1 in 10 boys. The teenage years bring significant challenges to the well-being of girls. This is when gender as well as cultural norms come into play and heighten their risk of child marriage, unwanted pregnancy, as well as exploitation. In some parts of the world, menstruation remains a taboo subject, and girls do not have the necessary information and supplies they need to stay safe and as well as healthy. Unfortunately, in its worst form, gender inequality shows up as violence. Some 1 in 20 girls between the age of 15 to 19, that's around 13 million girls, have experienced forced sex. In times of both peace and conflict, adolescent girls face the highest risk of gender-based violence. Hundreds of millions of girls worldwide are still subject to child marriage as well as female genital mutilation, both of which are recognized as human rights violations. 750 million women and girls were married before they turned 18. And experts actually have predicted that 10 million more girls at risk of child marriage will be at risk of child marriage, as a result of the pandemic. Next slide, please. But numbers are really just numbers. It's actually really hard for us to empathize without putting ourselves in other people's shoes. With that, I'd like to invite our first speaker, Nargis, to share with us the challenges that girls living in dangerous places face. A fun fact, Nargis actually visited Singapore about 2 years ago when I first joined the organization, when she was still working in World Vision. So she came to share her experiences working in the field as a communication staff with youth in Singapore. Hello, Nargis. Hi again. Thank you so much for joining us today. Very happy to have you. And I'm sure the audience is actually really interested to know more about you. Would you like to start by telling us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today. It's really a pleasure to share the stories of Afghan community with the participants. So yeah, my name is Nargis, and I'm originally from Afghanistan and currently living in the US. And today I would like to share my story with you. When it was war between Afghanistan and Russia, my family moved to Iran as a refugee to save their children's lives. So I was born and grew up in Iran. As you see in the picture, in here I was in grade first. So I finished my high school in Iran. I remember that I always felt shy to share my nationality with my Iranian friends because my Iranian friends thought that Afghan people are poor and uneducated. So I was afraid that I lose their friendship and relationship. So I never I never told them that I'm an Afghan. So I always hide my nationality. So when I finished my high school, my father and my mother decided to go back to Afghanistan because it was peace. So we moved to Afghanistan with my family. And there I participated in an university entrance exam. And luckily I was accepted in a World Vision midwifery program. In the picture, you will see the picture of my graduation event from midwifery school. I studied midwifery for 2 years, and then after the graduation, I worked as a midwife in a maternity hospital for 2 years. And then later on, I thought that I might be more helpful for my community if I join a large organization, so to provide support and help as a humanitarian worker. So I decided to join World Vision, and then it was 2010 that I joined World Vision. And then when I was working at the same time, I also I was studying for my bachelor degree. I graduated also from computer science. And both, I mean, I was working and also studying for my undergraduate. And then my recent job with World Vision, I was working as a communication manager, and I had the chance to go to remote areas of Afghanistan where World Vision was working. So as a communication manager, I capture photos, interview with women, with children. I hear their stories, their struggles, and you know, it was really a privilege for me, because not every girls, especially young girls, have the opportunity to travel within Afghanistan because of this insecurity and cultural perspective and limitations. So, but I was very lucky to travel to remote areas, and also I had an open-minded family that supported my education and also my social activity. And then after I worked around 9 years with World Vision, and then I decided to try to challenge myself. So I decided to join UNICEF. And I mean, after 2 years of working with UNICEF, I thought that I need to build up on my knowledge more. So I decided to study for a master's degree in communication and development. So I was accepted in one of the US university. So that's why currently I'm here in the US to finish my master's degree. So why, and I mean, I want to tell you that why I share my stories. Well, my journey was colorful, full of ups and downs, but you know, I enjoyed it because it helped me to become the person I am now. I have, as a young Afghan girl, I have a vision, and I'm passionate to change the situation for the better within my country. My education, my family support helped me to know myself better, to know my people better. And also it gave me a perspective on how I can be a good person for my country and for my family and the whole world. You know, my world, currently my world is large as the world. However, I would like to share another story, but it's not like mine, very colorful. I would like to share the stories of Elham, her story is just summarized in 2 phases. One is childhood, and then being at home for her for a long time. How? As I mentioned, I was lucky that I had a supportive family, that I had the opportunity to continue my education. And but Elham, who is one of my close relatives, didn't have this chance. When she was 14 years old, her father didn't allow her to continue her education. They were in Afghanistan. And so she studied on just a few years at a school, and then her father stopped her going to a school, saying that now it is time for you to get married. So yeah, she was married to one of the man in their relatives, and After a few months, she gave birth to her first baby. And currently, she has 5 children. And still, she's very young. She's around 25. So, but as I mentioned, her life was not colorful as mine, but she's doing her best to achieve for her children whatever she couldn't achieve for herself. Like now she's supporting her children to go to school, and she's doing whatever she can so that her children dreams come true. And there are a lot of such a story in my country, that because of the beliefs, the traditional perspective, and the close-minded parents' perspective, they are not allowing their girls go to school. They allow their boys go to school, but not girls. And the reason for, this, as I mentioned, that it has different reasons. One can be because there is no enough school in Afghanistan, especially in remote area, and girls have to walk for a long distance to reach to a nearby school, and there is a lot of danger between the way. So that's why some of the family don't allow their girls go to school. Or there are cultural perspective, as I mentioned, that the parents think that the girls for girls it's not very important to go to school. The main job of the girls is to get to be married and then taking care of the children and the family. So that's why it's not very important for them that a girl gets fully educated. And then another is that the number of female teachers in Afghanistan are not very high. And in some of the remote areas, there are men teachers. So that's why parents don't allow their girls to go to a school with men teachers. And however, during all these years, we have achieved a lot. We have achieved a lot. From 1 million, children who used to go to school, we have reached to more than 9 million. Is a lot. In a very conservative country, this is a lot. So that means that still there is hope in this country. And if the support is continue, I'm sure next year or then in the future, this number will be double if we support the girls' education and overall children education. Next slide, please. And yeah, it's not just related to Afghanistan, but overall the pandemic, the COVID-19 had some negative impact on our lives and also in the lives of Afghan children due to COVID. Schools were closed and children didn't have the opportunity to go to school. However, recently, the schools are open and children are going to school. However, again, because of that cultural perspective and also those traditional beliefs, girls are not going to school when they get older. And but this should be changed. If we are, the education is for both girls and boys. So all children should be educated equally, and no child should be left behind. So I'm confident. The younger generation of Afghanistan needs the world attention more than ever now. They don't need, the children don't need just empty words and just some nice words. No, they want action. What they need is action. The world should support the equal education of boys and girls. And if the world don't support the education for boys and girls, half of the Afghanistan population will be marginalized more than ever.
Thank you, Najesh, for sharing with us your inspiring story. I think it's quite clear to see the impact education has made and continues to make on your own life, and how important it is really for girls to actually get educated. While it's very good news to us to learn that schools in Afghanistan have reopened, I think it's also very clear that many uncertainties remain for the children and people of Afghanistan, and that really the future of girls in Afghanistan are really hanging in the balance right now. Next slide. I'd like to share some recent news articles that I found while I was preparing for this webinar. These are all articles that have come up from all the major news agencies in the past, I would say 2 to 3 weeks. And you can see, the cases of malnutrition, the healthcare is crumbling, economic chaos. You can see that Afghanistan is really in desperate need. And Afghanistan has actually been hit by a series of crises, including conflict, prolonged drought caused by climate change, as well as the pandemic. This has actually caused the number of internally displaced people to soar, overwhelming Afghans' fragile humanitarian aid system. Next slide. So World Vision has actually launched emergency response to help meet the basic needs of 1 million Afghan people. And of course, this includes half of which are probably children. This includes distributing life-saving food rations in partnership with the World Food Programme. It also includes providing primary health care via mobile health and nutrition teams. And of course, providing much needed access to water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities. Now that we've learned what life is like for girls living in Afghanistan, we switch gears to learn about the plight of girls living in city slums. Thank you, Narges, for your time. We will come back and talk to you a little while later.
Sure.
Okay. So before I introduce you to our next speaker, do allow me to give some background on our work in Kolkata. Next slide. So in Kolkata, there are actually 12 red light areas, which includes Sonagachi, which is Asia's largest red light district. Approximately 20,000 women are involved in prostitution in Kolkata. What is astounding is that more than 80% of these women have children who are living with them in the brothels. Mother and child or children actually share a room, and mothers typically use the same room to host their clients. Children are often asked to sleep under the bed when the mother hosts clients. Other times, mothers may ask their children to leave and wait on the street while they work till the wee hours. Of course, such early exposure to adult sexual activity actually leads to increased at-risk behavior. And when we talk about at-risk behavior, this includes things like delinquency from school, drug addiction, and worse still, second-generation prostitution of girls. Living in brothels, girls also face added dangers. Adolescent girls have been mistaken as prostitutes. There have been also cases of girls being sexually assaulted by their mother's clients or by other strangers visiting the brothels. It really is just not safe. Of course, living in the brothels, there is the stigma and discrimination that the children of the sex workers have to suffer in school. And this also, of course, extends into their relationships with others. Many of the children living in the brothels are actually first-generation learners. What this means is that their mothers are either uneducated or extremely lowly educated, which means they are unable to help them with their studies. This results actually in a huge learning gap for the children between their present ability and what they are actually required to learn. This increases school delinquency and dropout rates, which then ties back into the first point on increased risk behavior So they may drop out, they may turn to drugs, and they may turn to second generation prostitution for the girls. Violence is another major problem experienced by children living in red light district. More than half of the mothers were found to inflict violent physical or emotional punishment on their children. Also, a lot of the mothers have huge debts after borrowing from informal money lenders, and they are unable to meet the basic needs of their children. Some, in their desperation, actually resort to selling their daughters. Of course, the pandemic lockdown and curfew restrictions within the brothels have severely impacted the income of the women there. And in an earlier point, I shared about how girls actually face high risk of sexual violence from men who visit the brothels. They also face the danger of child sex trafficking because West Bengal is located in the eastern part of India, sharing international borders with Nepal as well as Bangladesh. As such, it is a major source, transit, and destination for child sex trafficking. Our project in Kolkata actually focuses on preventing second-generation child prostitution and rehabilitating sex-trafficked minors. We run drop-in centers in the community for children whose mothers are commercial sex workers. Today, we offer you a rare glimpse into the world of Rita, a beneficiary who has grown up in the brothels of Kolkata. Our colleague, Mr. Joseph Wesley, also shares more about our work in this pre-recorded segment. Please play the video.
My name is Wesley. I am the head of this anti-trafficking project of World Vision India. Our objective is to make sure that the children are not forced into what we call second-generation prostitution. So Calcutta being a major hub in the country for brothel-based prostitution, so our intervention makes sense here. And we run typically what we call child-friendly recreation and learning center, sort of drop-in center for the children of women involved in prostitution. Our intention is to make sure that children stay at school, they don't drop off, and they stay at school and they continue their education. So we provide different kinds of services, remedial education for those children who are struggling in their education, and then coaching, and then vocational training, and then readmission of dropout children back in school, and educational materials for them to stay on course. And we've been very successful. Whoever is in our program, and we were able to protect them from second generation prostitution. They're all continuing their education. So that's something really remarkable.
নমস্কার সকলকে, আমার নাম তনু, আমি কলকাতায় থাকি। আমি শেওড়াফুলির বাসিন্দা। এটি একটি রেড লাইট এরিয়া। এই অঞ্চলে প্রায় 300 জনেরও বেশি সেক্স ওয়ার্কার থাকে। আমার মাও তাদের মধ্যে একজন। অন্য অনেক বাচ্চাদের মতো আমিও এখানেই জন্মেছি এবং বড় হয়েছি। আমাদের মতো মেয়েরা যারা এখানে থাকে তারা নিজেদের সেফ ফিল মনে করে না। আমাদের সকলেরই একটা ভালো ভবিষ্যতের আশা রয়েছে, যাতে আমরা আমাদের পরিবারকে একটা ভালো জীবন প্রদান করতে পারি। আমরা চাই না যে আমাদের মায়েদের মতোই আমাদের একই পরিণতি হোক। আমার মা একাই আমাকে বড় করেছে। এই কারণে আমি সবসময় একটা রাস্তার খোঁজ করতাম যেটা আমাকে আমার ভালো ভবিষ্যতের দিকে নিয়ে যেতে পারে। ওয়ার্ল্ড ভিশনের পার্ট হওয়ার পর থেকে আমি নিজেকে সেফ ফিল মনে করি। আগে সন্ধে হলে আমাদের থাকার কোনো জায়গা ছিল না, আমরা রাস্তায় ঘুরে বেড়াতাম। এখন আমাদের একটা জায়গা হয়েছে যেখানে আমরা আমাদের টিচারের কাছ থেকে শিখতে পারি এবং আমাদের সময়টাকে সঠিকভাবে উপভোগ করতে পারি। আমার মা কোনোদিনও স্কুলে যাননি, তাই তিনি জানেন না আমায় কিভাবে পড়াশোনায় সাহায্য করতে হবে। এই কারণে আমার মা সবসময় উৎসাহ দেন যাতে আমি ওয়ার্ল্ড ভিশন সেন্টারে যাই। উনি ভাবেন যে ওখানে গেলে আমার পড়াশোনার উন্নতি হবে এবং সাথে সাথে আমার ভবিষ্যতও ভালো হবে।
And here in the red light areas we are working with the mothers. So we try to strengthen the relationship between the mother and child. We have a workshop called Celebrating Families, where we take them out of this red light area, help them to reflect on their past, how they reached this place, and then what do they want to do in future, where do they want to move on. So we provide them an opportunity to move out. Like if they want to leave this place, if they want to choose some other alternative, income generation, some other a safe and dignified way of living, we are willing to support them.
ওয়ার্ল্ড ভিশন আমাদের অনেকভাবে সাহায্য করেছে। বিশেষত এই প্যান্ডামিক আমাদের জীবনকে অনেক কষ্টকর করে তুলেছে। অ্যাডোলেশন মেয়ে হিসেবে আমরা অনেক মানসিক ও শারীরিক পরিবর্তনের মধ্যে দিয়ে যাই। ওয়ার্ল্ড ভিশন এর জন্য আমাদের কাউন্সিলিং প্রদান করেছে এবং হেল্প করেছে যাতে আমরা এই ইমোশনাল ইস্যুগুলোকে ম্যানেজ করতে পারি। এছাড়া আমাদের শিখিয়েছে নিজের মতো করে নিজেকে কিভাবে গ্রহণ করতে হয়। সেলিব্রেটিং ফ্যামিলি ওয়ার্কশপ, যেটা আমি আমার মায়ের সাথে অ্যাটেন্ড করেছিলাম, সেটা আমাকে আরও আত্মবিশ্বাসী করে তুলেছে। আমার স্বপ্ন আমি খুব ভালো করে পড়াশোনা করে গ্র্যাজুয়েশন কমপ্লিট করে একটা ভালো চাকরি করব। জীবনে খুব উন্নতি করব, যাতে আমি আমার মাকে এই জায়গা থেকে বের করে নিয়ে যেতে পারি এবং মাকে একটি সম্মানীয় জীবন প্রদান করতে পারি। তাই আমি চাই ওয়ার্ল্ড ভিশন সবসময় আমার পাশে থাকুক, যাতে আমি আমার জীবনের স্বপ্নগুলোকে পূরণ করতে পারি এবং সাকসেসফুল হতে পারি। ধন্যবাদ সকলকে।
Wow. Every time I've watched the video a couple of times, but every time I watch the video, I feel a lot. I think it's really hard to imagine a girl having to grow up in such an environment. But unfortunately, nobody can choose where they are born. I'm honestly very, very glad to be part of an organization that helps girls like Rita, so they can imagine a future beyond the brothels. World Vision, for this project, I think you already know, we run 3 drop-in centers where children can actually receive remedial education, psychosocial support, life and protection skills, meals as well. We also support the vocational training of out-of-school youth, providing them with lessons like computer courses, driving, beautician courses, so that they have a chance to be skilled for formal employment. Lastly, we actually also support aftercare home to ensure child survivors of sex trafficking and other sexual violence actually receive the care and support they need to not just recover, but to move on with life. If you'd like to find out more about this project, please scan the QR code at the bottom of the slide, or you can WhatsApp us. Girls, so next up, after we've learned about girls living in the city slums and in dangerous places like Afghanistan, we know that they all face different risks due to the context that they grew up in. Girls living in poor rural villages face their own set of challenges. I would like to invite our final speaker for the webinar, Jacqueline, to share with us what she learned on her trip to visit girls living in the rural villages of Philippines and why she decided to help them. A fun fact about Jacqueline, she may be a corporate executive by day, but in her spare time, I've heard that she actually loves to rough it out on her travels and go off the beaten track. I'm not sure if that's correct, Jacqueline.
Yes, thank you. That's an apt description. Yeah, corporate person by day, but in the off hours, I do volunteer work like with World Vision and other organizations, and I also do enjoy roughing it out for travel, but unfortunately, COVID-19 has put a dampener on that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for joining us today. Could you share with us, how did you end up visiting NTK in Philippines, and what was the experience like for you?
Well, actually, the way I got to NTK was actually through, and maybe the next slide explains it a bit better. I actually started volunteering with World Vision. I got to know about World Vision through basically a volunteer ministry of World Vision called Women of Vision. Women of Vision is a partnership of women who are dedicated to invest both the time, intellect, compassion, creativity, their energy, and also finances to help the needs of impoverished women and children. And that was really how I started this journey, which ultimately took us to NTK in 2019. Yeah. So maybe if I follow on from there, so Women of Vision, the purpose of Women of Vision, when I first started with them, was very powerful to me because it resonated with me that this was a group of women who were very compassionate about the plight of women, not just in Singapore, but also around the world, because for all the reasons that we heard in the presentations today, in the most vulnerable parts of the world, women and children are invariably the most impacted. They're always the most downtrodden, the most disadvantaged. And it was also something that I rallied around in terms of a cause. And I think that for us, there is also that moral mandate to be able to assist where we can, to really help the most vulnerable people in the world. So Women of Vision has actually been up for several years. And amongst the things that it has done, it has worked alongside World Vision in terms of reaching out its various programs. It did Love is the Reason in 2017, where it was a fundraiser event, primarily focused on one group of people, which was basically child protection work in Thailand. And that one was following a trip that was done to Thailand, and a group of volunteers had gone there and also seen the conditions under which the children in Thailand were suffering under. And following from that, there was basically the whole intention to do a fundraiser to really help empower the work on ground in Thailand. Then later on, we also did various outreach activities in shopping malls in 2018. And that also allowed us to reach to people for basically child sponsorship work, but also telling them a bit about the work in World Vision as well as Women of Vision. And lastly, the one that I'll be talking most about is basically the trip that we did in NTK, Philippines, back in 2019. There was an intention to do it in 2018, but NTK being very close to Boracay was also impacted when President Duterte decided to clean up Boracay in a very massive way, and the airports ended up all being closed. So we had to postpone our trip by a year. And that also gave us a little bit more time to also prepare for the trip that we finally did to NTK in 2019. Okay, and the trip to NTK was primarily to learn about the plight of the vulnerable girls there, and to really think about what we could do to facilitate, their conditions over there in the Philippines. So a little bit about NTK. Ironically, I've traveled around the world in a very extensive fashion, but Philippines was the one place I ironically hadn't been. And when I found out about Philippines and I researched more about Philippines, and as we were preparing the trip to NTK, it was also a period of discovery for myself, because even though it's in our backyard and we have a lot of connections to the Philippines, I personally had never traveled there. So NTK in Philippines, and we used to call it Antique because that's the way it's spelled, but that's not the way it's pronounced. It's a region that World Vision Singapore has been supporting in terms of the programs there. And I should also mention that when World Vision goes in to support a location, it doesn't go in on a hit and run basis. It doesn't go in only on a programmatic basis. It stays in for up to 15 years to be able to ensure that the work permeates through the communities that it supports, and it also is able to properly uplift the communities that it's engaged in. So this particular area that we went to was in this municipality called Kulasi. And the impact area population is roughly about 40,000 people. And what was more astounding was that over a quarter of the population in this area lived below the national poverty line. And this particular region and this particular province has also one of the highest rate of malnutrition within the entire West Visayas region. This is a community that had also been quite badly hit by Typhoon Haiyan a number of years ago prior to our going. And this was basically a community that was recovering from that. It's a community that basically, being close to the sea, has fishermen whose obviously livelihoods were impacted when Typhoon Haiyan came through. but there was also a little bit of rural activity as well as agriculture activity that goes on within NTK. Okay, next slide. So some of the challenges that we discovered prior to going, and certainly when we were there, was really the sense that economic opportunities were very limited because, as I mentioned earlier, they were primarily fishermen whose livelihoods depended on that, and Philippines being very exposed to weather conditions and weather-based impacts, that is always very turbulent at certain points of the year. So economic opportunities quite limited, and that also prevents the community from thriving as well as growing. Health nutrition, I mentioned before, that basically it's below, it's one of the most malnourished locations within the West Visayas region. So there is really poor nutritional status of the community children. And this was also something that we did observe, because one of the things that we did was in the short time that we were there, we were able to visit with the communities there and also take a look at the living conditions under which people were thriving on a day-to-day basis. Education was the other piece, which was finally what we decided was the thing that we would go in to help uplift as well as support. Lack of literacy and lack of access to education was also one of those things that we saw within the community there. And that was then, which was what led us to then create this Flap a Wing program, under which we decided to uplift about 38 girls. We selected 38 girls within the program to basically give and surround them with programs that would basically be a focus on instilling self-worth as well as confidence to them, because it was also a critical age. We were focused on children. If you go on to the next slide, we were focused on girls that were aged between 12 to 17 years in age. And that age was particularly vulnerable because they are on the pathway of becoming adults, and they are on the pathway of basically choosing their career paths or their life paths ahead. And we felt that this was the point of intervention. And we wanted to make sure that they didn't just have access to formal school programs in the school system, but on top of that, were also uplifted with other ways of uplifting as well as enriching themselves in terms of life skills development. So a Flap of Wing program was created in conjunction with the World Vision Office in Philippines. And this was, the objectives were several-fold. It was to develop as well as to pilot a new signature youth development program. And our intention was to be able to bring this to other locations for eventual use. The second was to impact the lives of the youth. And finally, we thought it was important to prepare them for economic citizenship, because ultimately that will be the thing that will also uplift not just themselves, but also the communities that they live in. And finally, it was really to also ensure that the youth will be able to contribute as they grow older to the wider community and the good of others within the segments that they're in eventually. So if you move on to the next slide, I will now play a video of what we saw there, and also the community that we were able to spend some time with, and also the children that we were able to engage with during the time that we were at in NTK.
Tungod nga ang edukasyon dapat mag-umpisa sa mga panimalay, kadugong pa nga ginikanan ang kulang sa pag-intindi kung paano sagudon kag atipanon ang andang mga kabataan. Kinahanglan tudluan ang mga ginikanan kang insakto nga pamaagi kung paano sagudon kagiyahan ang diyang mga kabataan. Kinahanglan na training man ang mga teachers sa agad sanda mangin katimbang ka mga ginikanan sa paggiya kang mga kabataan sa andang komunidad.
I want to become a teacher someday because I want to help my family and I want to help children know that how to read, write, and count.
Hi, I'm Janella. I'm 14 years old and I'm a grade 9 student. My ambition is to become a successful policewoman someday because I want that people will stop killing and doing the illegal and immoral works. I would like to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to join the Flag Owing program, and I hope you will continue to support us. Thank you and God bless.
Somewhere out there beneath the pale moonlight, someone's thinking of me and loving me tonight. Somewhere out there, someone's saying our prayers that we'll find one another in that beach somewhere out there.
Thank you. So if you go on to the next slide. So after the visit to NTK, where we basically spent time with the children, we ran programs for them, we had lunch with them, we brought Singapore food so that we could introduce a little bit of where we came from to them through the universal language of food. We spent the entire afternoon with them, learning about their hopes and dreams, also doing programs to be able to help them with a little bit of artwork, because one of the volunteers that came with us is an incredible artist. And she was able to rally them around some of the artwork, and we broke them into groups and made them draw what they wanted to become when they grew up. And I thought that really encapsulated a sense of their hopes and their dreams, which was a very fulfilling day for us. So the trip ended, and after the trip ended, we felt that there was a need to not just visit, but also have a call to action. And the next slide demonstrates what we had done after this. We didn't sit on our laurels. We didn't say, that was a good visit and that was the end of it. We decided that we needed to do something. And what we did was we did a Wings of Change fundraiser. We initially had a pretty modest target, but what we ended up doing was we were able to raise almost 60,000 through an event that was held at Mount Faber. And we had a total of about 25 tables that were sold. And because we were able to exceed the targets, we were not just able to benefit the 38 girls, we were also able to get 20 children sponsored. And additionally, there was also flow over to support 300 girls and boys to receive back to school kits. So that day was, we ran it for a couple of hours, and there was also a Filipino a cappella group that came and serenaded us with the incredible talents. And I think it basically just resonated with us, and it sort of reinforced that the Philippines is such a rich bastion of talent. And so it was with that we closed out this. We were planning to go back to NTK last year and also sometime this year, but unfortunately travels are such that this has not, COVID has prevented that. But that is certainly on our plans, which is to go back and also visit with the 38 girls and also the rest that we've been able to benefit. So with that, I'll end with the last slide, which is a quote by one of the actresses that I greatly admire, Lupita Nyong'o. And for some of you know, she was the actress in 12 Years a Slave. And she said something at the Oscars, which I thought was very, very appropriate and powerful here, which is no matter where you're from, your dreams are valid. So I've always reflected on the fact that my privilege of being born in an economically stable and progressive place like Singapore was not genius on my part. It wasn't something that I wielded any influence over. If anything at all, I have God and my parents to thank. But therefore, it's also nothing that I should be arrogant or take for granted. And therefore, it's also a good reminder that as citizens of the world, we have a moral obligation to do more for the disadvantaged. So thank you very much. So I'll hand the time back to Eileen. Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Wow, what a passionate and inspiring sharing. I totally agree with what you mentioned just now about how, we are born, we don't really have a choice where we are born, and really the fact that we're all born in Singapore. I mean, most of us on the call, it is really just a blessing that we are born where we are. About the video that was played just now, I think one of the things that I noticed was that some of the children actually have like golden blonde highlights in their hair. And actually, I saw this when I first visited Cambodia, I think more than 10 years ago during university. And the children of Cambodia also had these golden streaks in their hair. And at that time, I was like thinking, wow, they're so beautiful. They have these golden streaks in their hair. Did they dye it or anything? And it's only actually after I joined World Vision and started doing development work that I found out that this is actually a sign of malnutrition. I mean, we might think it might look very pretty or it might be dyed, but what you don't know is actually a sign of malnutrition, and it actually shows up in the hair. Another thing is that I think it was really inspiring, Jack, to hear about how you and the other volunteers of Women of Vision actually came together to help the girls in NTK. It's amazing what transformation we can make when we work together for the better good. I think what I'm getting from the sharing of all the speakers today is that gender inequality issues can be extremely deep-rooted. I also got that educating girls is really one of the keys to addressing these issues. I think we now have a little more time left for a short panel discussion with Nargis as well as Jacqueline, as well as any Q&As that people have been sending in for both our speakers. If you have any questions, please write them in our Q&A section, and we will try our best to answer them. I have a question here for Nargis. Nargis, in the many trips that you've gone to gather stories in Afghanistan, what was one story that really captured your heart, that you really remember? Nargis, sorry, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry. So, well, I remember that in my last trip to one of the remote areas, I was with a representative of World Vision Canada. We went to a house where the mother was about to marry off her daughter. Just because of money, because she didn't have the money to pay the rent of her house. So if she didn't, she wanted the bride price to pay the rent. Otherwise, the house owner just withdraw them from the house, and they had to live on the street. And because of a community change session, World Vision community change session, all the neighbors came together and then collect money for the mother, and also and to pay the rent. And also they found a part-time job for the mother so she can work and pay other life expenses. And all it was because of World Vision Community Change Program. Because under that program, community members came together, discuss about burning issue in their community and how they can help them. It can be, for example, financial support. It can be, for example, talking with the man of the family to, to convince him not to marry her children and her daughter. Or it can be anything, or for example, girls' education. So I really love that community change session because the solution came from the community, and it's the community that has the ownership of that program. So I really love it.
Thank you, Nargis. I agree that, for World Vision, we work a lot with community members to bring about change in their communities. And it's really great to hear that, in this case that you're mentioning, the neighbors actually came together to help the mother to raise money so that she didn't have to sell her daughter off. And I think that's really the community spirit that we should all aim to have in all the communities that serve, and even in the communities that we live in. It would be great if we need help and our neighbors, the community actually steps up to help us. I would like to actually pose the same question to Jack. Among the many volunteering that you do and also the trips that you've gone on, can you share a story that really captured your heart?
Well, for me, the one of the interactions I had, which actually made a real impression on me, was actually in NTK. We had taken the afternoon to go and visit with the community and where the people lived. And in one of the classrooms, one of the houses, there was also a bit of a makeshift classroom. I met this very young girl, which I later learned she was about 13 years old, but she was so tiny, she looked like she could have been 8 years old. And I was talking with her, and she was very well spoken. And she talked about how her vision was to be a doctor. And then so we continued chatting, and I said, where's your father? And she said that she doesn't know who her father was, and actually it was also quite a common thread with a lot of the children that we saw. The father figure was either missing or was just unknown, or the father figure had passed on because of illness or something else. And when I was talking to her about her vision to be a doctor, I asked her, I said, what, are you going to school now? And she said that she was, but she was also very busy. So I said, what are you busy with? And I realized that to the side of her was this lady who was just sitting very quietly and intently. And then I realized that was the mother. So then I asked the mother, I said, what is she busy with? And then the mother, in halting English, basically said that her daughter, because it's just her daughter, as well as a young baby, took the trouble every morning to walk 45 minutes to a market to buy up basically entrails of chickens from the chicken seller. She would buy the leftover entrails after they had sold all the chickens, and she would walk back to the house early in the morning, where the mother would prepare these entrails, and in the evening she would come back from school and basically set up a stall by the roadside to basically barbecue the entrails. So she said that was part of what she needed to do to make sure that they had enough money to survive day by day. But she was hoping that would pave the way for her to eventually go to medical school, because she was also trying to balance studying hard. And that just really resonated with me, and it really touched my heart, because here was a young girl, was 13 years old, taking the responsibility of basically an adult to compensate for the fact that there was a lack of a father figure or lack of another adult in the family. So that was one of those things that really struck me, really struck home. I later ended up sponsoring the girl. So that was also quite fulfilling on my part, because I later became a child sponsor of her.
I love how you ended up sponsoring the child.
Yeah, because I figured that 40. So this was where when we sponsor a child, it's $45 a month. It's basically what four coffees at Starbucks. It's about depending on what you buy, right? It's about 8-9 coffees in Starbucks, or your boba tea or bubble tea. But here, what your $45 can do is really to impact the life of somebody like this, who really has a dream and is really taking steps to get there, albeit in a very bit by bit fashion. And this was also something, if I thought I could substitute my coffee habit, I could really change somebody's life. But people like that really don't really have a lot to substitute their lives with.
Well said, well said. I think another thing that struck me when you were sharing was that the girl looked a lot younger than her age, and yet she also was more mature than her age, and I think that's quite relevant for a lot of the communities that we help. I mean, even girls in Afghanistan, they are forced to grow up and mature before their time. And help out the family, in terms of working to supplement finances or taking care of their siblings, for example, where their mother works. So, I mean, girls in such situations actually really are very, very mature for their age. I do have another question here for Jacqueline, another two questions, in fact. How do I offer my services to be part of World Women of Vision?
Well, contact us through World Vision, and we do run programs on an occasional basis. We have reduced the frequency because of COVID, being unable to really meet on site, and also take basically take the initiative to go overseas for the right now. But we'll go through World Vision to get through to us, because we are always looking for volunteers and always looking for like-minded women and men even, because we've also had couple of very active volunteers who are men who have also felt the need to be dedicated to the cause, and they come and they show up at our various events that we were able to hold pre-COVID, post-COVID. In this current COVID world, it's been a very different environment, unfortunately. Yeah, so get in touch with us.
Thank you, Jacqueline. We have another question here for Nargis. What are some of your thoughts and emotions around children, especially girls, as you watch all that is unfolding in Afghanistan?
Actually, it's a bit heartbreaking because as I mentioned in my stories, that I was lucky that I have a very supportive family, and the opportunity was good for me to continue my education. And I have a lot of dreams still to fulfill. But I mean, I see that those young girls, they are confined in the four walls of their house and just being dictated that they should be take care of their the housework and get married and then taking care of children. Is very heartbreaking. That why half of the Afghanistan generation should be marginalized. Why? I mean, girls, education should be equal for girls and boys. Why we are ignoring half of the generation? Otherwise, Afghanistan will not be improved if we ignore those groups. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And now, I mean, my mission and my vision is that after graduation, I go back and I apply what I learned here to Afghanistan to see how I can help them, how I can help that the education equity and equality in Afghanistan.
Thank you, Nargis. I think that really speaks so much about the person that you are. You know, like, I mean, you could do a lot of other things with your life. You could remain in the US and, you know, work in a corporate job. But I mean, I think it's really heartwarming to hear that you want to go back and help your country. So thank you for that. I do have we have time for one last question. And I do have a question here. Is it important, maybe all of us can discuss this, but is it important to engage boys and men in gender equality discussions and issues?
Shortly, I say yes, it's important because, for example, in Afghanistan context, men are the decision makers. If we just keep saying that, to the mothers or for the children, just saying that girls' education is important or education is important, but if we don't focus on men, it wouldn't be effective because the decision makers in Afghanistan are men. We need to provide more awareness raising for them. We need to convince them that there is no any difference between girls and boys. So yeah, it's important. And also we need to work on boys awareness. Why? Because those boys in the future will be the future husband, the future man of the family. So from childhood, we need to work on the mindset of children to accept equality in education, and not only education, everything, social activity in human perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I thought
definitely.
Najas said it really, really well. I think in a lot of the most vulnerable parts of the world, and we also live in a more patriarchal, world. There is a need for us to engage the men, and that's also how I think I've seen also World Vision going through the channels of leadership, and invariably the people in power and the people in leadership tend to be men. And you need to effect changes right at the very level, at those levels, because if not, the cycle will continue to perpetuate, and there's no progression in these societies that we're trying to assist.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think boys and men need to be on board for real change to take place in communities. Especially, I mean, in Afghanistan, faith leaders actually hold a lot of influence over the communities, and faith leaders are typically men as well. I think men and boys need to really understand that gender inequality affects them negatively as well, and they need to also realize how empowering girls and women benefits them and their community's ability to develop and progress. So yeah, thank you for that very important and question. I think it really brought a lot of depth to the discussion. We have one last question, sorry, for Najas. Najas, you spoke strongly about education. What makes you focus so much about education and not, example, food or other areas of need? Why is education so important?
Because when someone is educated, she or he can work. She or he has an open-minded. I personally believe that the current context in Afghanistan is because of, most of the people are uneducated. So if we have educated generation, then they can easily work, earn income, accept changes easily. So from my point of view, one of the reasons that there is gender discrimination, a low level of school rates is because of uneducated generation. So education is very important for Afghanistan if the country wants to be independent.
Well said, Najas. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jacqueline and Najas, for your time, for being with us here today. We now have a short message from World Vision Afghanistan National Director Assunta Charles on the current situation in Afghanistan.
This is a country that needs us more than ever. I have been working in this country and I have seen how much these Afghan communities have gone through. And I feel this is the right moment to be with them and to stand by their side and say that we are with you and we will stand by you. And especially World Vision works with children, and we want to give the promise to the children, we are with you and we will see that you have a brighter future and your visions are made a reality.
Okay, next slide, please. So I think we can tell that, if all of us work together, we can make life better for every girl so she can be free to reach for her dreams. This International Day of the Girl, we are aiming to help 1,000 girls at least, and we hope that you can help us. You can do so, next slide, by supporting our projects in Afghanistan and India. For Afghanistan, we're really working on providing for the basic needs of the most vulnerable right now. And in India, as mentioned earlier, we are really working on preventing second-gen prostitution and also helping to rehabilitate victims of sex trafficking and sexual violence. If you read require more information on these projects, please scan the link, the QR code, or WhatsApp us. We do have staff on standby to assist you. Next slide. If you would like to become a child sponsor like Jacqueline, and you would like to help girls living in rural villages, do consider child sponsorship, where you can get to build a unique connection with a girl from your country of choice. I have here with me, you can see 3 pictures of 3 girls. They are all from different countries. The first girl on the left, very cute girl. Her name is Alice Nicole. She's from the Philippines, and she's actually 5 years old this year, I believe. Alice has no brothers and 1 sister. She lives with her parents in NTK in a rural area. Her father is employed and her mother is self-employed. But unfortunately, their combined earnings are not enough to provide for the needs of their family. So if you would like to sponsor Alice, please WhatsApp us and our staff will help you. The next girl, the girl in the middle, is from JWG, and her name is actually Kamala Imad, and she is, I believe, 8 years old this year, and she loves riding a bicycle. Kamala Imad has 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Her father is employed, but he does not earn enough to provide for the needs of the family. Her mother is unemployed and stays home as a homemaker. The last girl on the right, also a very cute girl, is from Ethiopia, from an area that we work in called Yaya Gulale. She is actually 9 years old this year, and her name is Bertukan. She loves jumping rope, and actually one of the chores that she does at home is carrying water. And she has no brothers and a sister. Her parents are self-employed, but again, their combined earnings are not enough to provide for the needs of the family. So if you would like to sponsor Bertukan, do WhatsApp us. If you would actually like to have more child profiles to consider, please scan the QR code so our staff can actually share more profiles with you. To conclude, we'd like to thank both our speakers, Jacqueline and Narges, for joining us today. We also like to thank every one of you who have joined the webinar and have stayed on. We hope the session was informative and compelling. Before you leave, do take a minute to help us complete a survey so we can take note of areas of improvement that we can put into practice for our next webinar. Thank you, everyone, and wishing you a blessed weekend ahead. Thank you. Bye.